بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله تعالى من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله أدى الأمانة وبلغ الرسالة وجاهد في الله حق جهاده حتى أتاه الله اليقين. ابتعثه الله ليخرج العباد من عبادة العباد لعبادة رب العباد، ومن ضيق الدنيا لسعة الدنيا والآخرة معا، ومن جور الأديان إلى عدل الإسلام. فاللهم اجزه عنا خير ما جزيت نبينا عن أمته. We praise Allah, we praise Him again, and we thank Him. And we ask His help, and we ask His forgiveness. And we ask Him for sincerity in our words and deeds. And we seek refuge in Allah. We run to Him from His anger to His compassion. We seek refuge in Allah from the cursed Satan and from bad deeds and from evil whispers inside us and from our lower self. Whomever Allah guides is truly the one who's guided. And whomever He leaves to stray, you'll never find for him a guardian nor a guide. And I bear witness that there is nothing worthy of worship or direction or submission except Allah, the one true God, the High, the Exalted and Glorified. And I bear witness that Muhammad ﷺ is His messenger and His prophet, final messenger and prophet, the seal of all prophets that He sent with His truth and His light, to light the darkness, to free the creation out of enslavement to other creation, to the servitude of the Lord of creation, and from the constraint of knowing only this world to the vastness of knowing the world and the hereafter together, knowing that after this life is the real life. The life that we're working and living for now is the one that awaits us after we die, if we do what's right. And from the injustice that comes with making decisions and with running communities based on whims and desires, based on selfish interests of individuals or groups, to the justice and freedom that comes with divinely guided decision making. So may Allah, the High and Exalted, give Muhammad ﷺ the best reward that He's given a prophet and a messenger for his nation. Last time we talked about the prerequisite mindset needed for a community to be the revival for its nation. For a small group to decide that they will be of those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا لَمَّا صَبَرُوا وَكَانُوا بِآيَاتِنَا يُوقِنُونَ. That we made of them leaders. He says this about the nation before us, or the nations before us, that He gave a covenant to, and most of them betrayed. But then when a small group took up the task of bringing their nation back to uplift humanity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says when they did that, when they were patient, they believed that they could make it happen, they were persistent, and they believed in our signs. وَكَانُوا بِآيَاتِنَا يُوقِنُونَ. All the signs that God will give victory despite adversity. The signs that God gives victory to those who follow in the footsteps of the prophets. The signs that God gives victory to those who are upholding justice. The sign that God gives victory to those who keep in mind that they are caretakers of all people, if they are to be given victory. The signs that are for the elevating of all of earth. Once they believe in those signs and are persistent, we made them leaders, Allah says. And then the prerequisite is to know and to believe that there's no such thing as we can't, no matter how small, and there's no such thing as excuses, no matter how hard. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala named the first chapter, we said, after the excuses that were given by nations before us. Al-Baqarah, the story of the cow. A simple task to save them from not holding accountable someone for the crime of murder, yet they made it too hard and didn't want to do it and looked for ways out. So God made it the example for us and named the chapter after it. And then He gave us an example in the same chapter of those who did uphold and they persisted. And despite being small in number, they stood against the tallest task on earth at the time, the tyrant regime of the time of Goliath, and defeated Goliath, and then became the leaders of humanity. So that's the prerequisite for us to rally and revive our community to uphold its mission. But then the question is, what is the mission? What is the mission that if we are to be persistent, to believe that we can make it happen, to believe that even if after all of us today become excited and say we're going to be part of it as a community, if all that's left is 5 people together, 3 men and 2 women, or 3 women and 2 men, that it can grow from there and be victorious. Yes, we may believe, then what is the mission we're trying to do? And before I tell you the mission, let me read to you a quote by a famous author of the West, of Britain. His name is H.G. Wells. You're probably familiar with some of his movies. He's an author from the 1800s. And he was an intellectual in his own right. He said that Islamic teachings have left great traditions for equitable and gentle dealings and behavior, and inspire people with nobility and tolerance. These are human teachings of the highest order, and at the same time practicable. These teachings brought into existence a society in which hard-heartedness and collective oppression and injustice were the least when compared to all other societies. Islam is replete with gentleness, courtesy, and fraternity. That's H.G. Wells describing what Islam should do for a community. And all I ask you to do is to commit to bringing back this description to our community. Leo Tolstoy, he's regarded as potentially one of the greatest authors of all time. And Leo Tolstoy, by the way, in his life, he became influenced by pacifist ideals. Pacifism is the belief that war should not happen on earth anymore. He was, some believe, many believe, he inspired Gandhi and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Leo Tolstoy says, the legislation of the Quran will spread all over the world because it agrees with the mind, logic, and wisdom. And some may ask, why did these people not then become Muslim? Some actually believe Leo Tolstoy, before he passed away, was a Muslim. In his final work called The Confession, the last statement he states, if nothing else, consider me a kind Muhammadan, which is what people call Muslims in Europe at the time. But it doesn't matter whether he was or wasn't. Because I'm not telling you this to tell you be proud because H.G. Wells and Leo Tolstoy thought Islam was great. Because that's not where the source of greatness is. The source of greatness is what Muhammad ﷺ taught us, and that we need to pick back up. And we need to die, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, to pour it over our lives and dye our lives with it. To reshape our lives with it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, صِبْغَةَ اللَّهِ وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ مِنَ اللَّهِ صِبْغَةً وَنَحْنُ لَهُ عَابِدُونَ. It is the reshaping, the remorphing, or the sibgha. Sibgha is the tanning or the dye. When an object becomes recolored and reshaped and looks now like what it was dyed with. That's what happens to a believer. That's what happens to a community that takes on the sibgha of Allah. So the mission is for us to rediscover this inspiration. This inspiration that was understood by intellectuals who honestly examined it, that it would change the world, that it had in it what could inspire nations to transform themselves. Because whether our nation recognizes every issue that is troubling it, whether all our peers recognize the issues troubling us as a nation, or they don't, we, as believers in God, must be able to recognize the issues troubling our nation. first have to recognize the issues troubling our homes and commit that as leaders of our homes, as members of our homes, we're responsible to revive and resuscitate our homes. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge because we all have our weaknesses and we all make mistakes. Every human is going to make a lot of mistakes, our beloved said. But the best of those who make mistakes are those who return to God every time they make a mistake. So we reform our homes, and then the mission is to translate this Quran. The mission, because when the Prophet ﷺ says, وَذَرْوَةَ سَنَامِهِ الْجِهَادِ, the word that everyone here may be embarrassed or not sure how to mention it in public, that our beloved, peace and blessings upon him, said that the apex of this faith is jihad, fi sabilillah. Jihad. The word jihad comes from the root jahada, which means expended tireless effort. The word jihad means the expending of tireless effort. It's when someone gives everything they have, so he jahad, gave everything possible. And in the context of the faith, it's to give everything possible for the cause of justice. And justice is not left to the definition of every person, so that every person becomes a vigilante and thinks that they're doing what they're doing for the cause of justice. But justice is defined by Allah, high and exalted. And we won't go into that in detail. But as broad headlines, justice certainly means that on the surface or in a neighborly context, I can't sleep when my neighbor is hungry at night. I'm not comfortable sleeping. Justice, in a broad sense, means that I'm not happy, knowing that I'm part of an economic system that indebts the majority of my peers and makes them slaves to their debts. That's not justice. And so, we can go into detail. But the task of the believers in the Quran, the task of the followers of Muhammad ﷺ, in the context that we're in, the mission that we have, is not significantly complex, but it is a tough mission. But it's tough without embarking on it. When we embark on it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He promises that He'll make it easy for us. فَأَمَّا مَنْ أَعْطَى وَاتَّقَى وَصَدَّقَ بِالْحُسْنَى فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى. That whoever believes and is conscious of Allah and gives of himself, gives selflessly, then we will guide him to the easy one. And the easy one certainly is the service of Allah. So the promise from Him is it will become easy. So as I tell you the rest of what this mission is on a broad sense, and it sounds like a very tall order for us as a small community of people who haven't yet done this together, do not think of how hard it is. Because remember, the prerequisite is to have no doubt that you can with Allah's will. كَمْ مِنْ فِئَةٍ قَلِيلَةٍ غَلَبَتْ فِئَةً كَثِيرَةً بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. And that's why that had to be first. We had to talk about that first before describing the mission. Because the first thing that comes to mind, and some of my peers would tell me when I tell them this is the mission we're given, as believers in Muhammad, followers of Muhammad in America, they would tell me that's mission impossible. That's what should be called mission impossible. A believer doesn't think mission impossible. A believer has no doubt that not only is it possible, but it will come to be. A believer stands, even if standing alone. Inna Ibrahim kana ummah. Ibrahim alayhi salam was a nation by himself. Because for a long time in his life, he had to uphold what God ordered of reviving earth all by himself. And so if even standing alone, the belief is it will happen. The mission will come to be successful. The question is, who of us will become part of it? Who of us will be counted when we stand in front of Allah and He asks us what we did with our lives, and we're about to answer what we did, will He say to us, you told the truth, when we tell Him that we expended our life seeking to establish your will on earth, seeking to establish jihad in our lives? Not the jihad as defined by Fox News, or as defined by a small group that has gone against the majority or all scholars on earth, saying that they're doing jihad where they are. But the jihad as defined by our beloved peace and blessings upon Him. That you take to the people the message of the faith, and you make it happen in the lives of people. And you look at the context you're in, and you reform that context to be more aligned to the divine will. Because the whole purpose was understood by the companions and shared when they went to Persia. So the mission must be that we understand better what it is that Allah wants for our people, what it is that Allah wants for us as a humanity. We have to understand that well, and we have to have a relationship with the Quran, not just as a spiritual book and recite it spiritually, but also recite it and read it and learn it as a code of conduct and as a manifesto of life. That is the Quran. To us, it is a recipe of success. In it are the paths to addressing all the issues that trouble our nation. And our mindset has to be that we're doubtless that in it are all the solutions to what troubles our nation. But the task, the challenge, is it hasn't yet been translated to them. To the extent that today, things that are actually positive for our nation, if they were to be implemented, are seen as potentially archaic, harmful things because of us not being able to rediscover them in the context we're in. So what has to happen is that all of us as a population, all of us as a community, have a relationship with the Quran. But not every single one of us has to be a scholar. But there have to be of us scholars. Of us, there have to be scholars that are willing not only to learn the Quran in the way that it's being learned by everyone around the world, but also to learn it with the understanding that I have to also relate it to the issues troubling my nation and be able to draw the correlation. It is now time that we not only have scholars of faith that have the understanding that may not have as much understanding of the context we're living in. It is time that people that are living like everyone else take upon themselves to become having some level of scholarship in the faith. Because there's no way to be able to relate the solutions of the Quran to what we have in our lives unless the two scholarships come together. The scholarship of life, understanding business, understanding economics, understanding scientific discovery, understanding social issues, understanding psychological issues that individuals have. All of these sciences must be seen as part of our worship to God, to have sufficient knowledge and understanding. And people who have that same knowledge take upon themselves the task of having at least sufficient knowledge of the Quran, sufficient knowledge of the tradition to be able to connect the two. Without it, the two knowledge bases are divorced from each other. They're separated. And all we're doing is borrowing the interpretation of the Quran from the past. And what's happening is we try to reconcile, and when we can't, we just assume that this isn't an area that's going to make sense for our people. Because the Quran isn't to be applied in America, maybe in that area. And we just assume that the Quran isn't really, in its totality, for a nation like America. Because the majority aren't Muslims. But that's a false assumption. Because the Quran, in it, is the salvation for all issues, for all nations. And that assumption is the same assumption made by people that say that religion has nothing to do with daily life. And that's not what Islam is. Islam is a return of our humanity back to the fact that decision making that we make for each other, the only way that it can be beneficial to all is to leverage the divine wisdom, to leverage the divine inspiration. This might all be hard to understand sometimes, but to make it easy, what we have to do, what we have to commit to today, is an understanding of the Quran that's renewed. Not assumed. When we hear, for instance, as an example, one of my friends came up to me and said, how would you go and explain the law, the Sharia law of apostasy to people and reconcile it with freedom of religion? I've been asked that question. I've been asked many questions about how people understand certain things in the Sharia with what we're saying are the values of our faith. We say our faith upholds and protects freedom of religion. Yet people will say, but if someone becomes a Muslim and leaves, they're supposed to be killed. So the question is, do we actually understand that ruling properly? Or are we assuming that explanation that's been given by some scholars is the one that's relevant and contextual and correct? Imam Shafi'i, when he lived in Iraq, he had a certain set of rulings and explanations and deductions he made from the Quran and the Sunnah. When he moved to Egypt, with a different culture, and a different context, and a different populational distribution of people and religions and races, many of his rulings changed. But the reference is the same. Imam Shafi'i's knowledge base was the same. What differed was how he understood the benefit and harm application of the rulings, and they changed. This isn't for any person in the audience or for me even to do. This is after significant scholarship. But what's our role in that? Our role first is to have no doubt, is to have enough knowledge, to come to study circles enough, to read the Quran privately enough, such that we reach a level of doubtlessness that this Quran is for addressing every issue that troubles our nation in America, every issue that troubles our city of Evansville, every issue that troubles our neighborhood that we live in, every issue that troubles our home. We have to reach that level of doubtlessness. And whatever causes doubt in that, in our minds, we have to seek the answers to it. That's the minimum for us to seek of knowledge. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. وبارك اللهم على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. When we talk about the minimum knowledge that each of us needs to gain and the commitment and faith that we must have in the solutions that the Quran has, we can look at a couple of examples. An example is this person that I told you that his doubt is how do we reconcile the law of apostasy with freedom of religion. What I say to the person first is no matter how busy you are, you have to seek and relentlessly pursue whatever calms that doubt until you have what calms that doubt. And you're able to reconcile it with people and with yourself. Because to have that doubt and live with it means that we're accepting this assumption we've been making as a community that the Quran is for the Muslims in America, not for all of America. And we're accepting that when we say the Quran is for all of America, means that we want to coerce our peers with Sharia law, which is what they're saying. This is what's said. So if someone heard me that is one of the right-wing extremists, they would hear me saying this and they would say, this man wants Sharia law imposed on Americans. Well, based on what they understand to be Sharia law, of course I don't want it imposed on Americans or imposed on me or imposed on anyone here. Because what they understand as Sharia law is incorrect. And if we have the incorrect understanding of Sharia law, whether it's because it's being practiced incorrectly in certain areas in the world, or whether it's being understood and propagated incorrectly by Muslims and non-alike. Our job as revivalists of Muhammad's footsteps, may the peace and blessings be upon him, in this city, is to reconcile our doubts with it. And the knowledge exists. And if it doesn't exist, then we groom our children to seek that knowledge and to seek to shed that doubt. And when we talk about study circles, yes, we should come together and remember Allah, recite the Quran, and gain that reward. And then we should seek to build on that, in that it's not just spiritual, it's intellectual. There has to be an intellectual element. So what is that answer to the apostasy question, for instance? As an example, apostasy is clearly defined in the Quran and in the Hadith. Apostasy is mentioned in the Quran without the consequence of it. Because the belief that apostasy is defined in the Quran, or in the faith, as someone leaving the religion after they came in, is 100% incorrect. Apostasy, as defined by Muhammad ﷺ when mentioning the actual hadd itself, the actual consequence itself, and in all of his other tradition, is clear that the apostasy that deserves a consequence is what would be called and termed in our nation today high treason against the government, against the people. High treason. A person becoming trusted with information that, if given to an enemy, would cause lives to be lost in his home country. That's the definition of high treason. And that's the definition of ridda, as the scholars have interpreted. When you look at the totality of scholarship, this is not my opinion. I am not qualified to give fatwa. This is what I'm relaying to you of those who have looked into the issue in a contextual concept for our times. Because how governments and nations are today is very different than how governments and nations were at the time. At the time, someone leaving the movement of the Prophet ﷺ, he was thus leaving commitment to the nation, and thus leaving and it was at a time of war in the peninsula. There are people who left the faith at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and there was no such thing mentioned about them having ridda. Like even the husband of Habiba, may Allah be pleased with her, who later married the Prophet ﷺ. But that was before he knew a ton of information in Islam, and he became a Christian, and he was left alone. Nothing was ever mentioned of seeking him out. There was a Bedouin who came to the Prophet ﷺ in Medina 3 years before the Prophet ﷺ passed away, accepted Islam. And then 3 days later he got a stomachache. And he was a very simple-minded man. He said, I've never had a stomachache in my life. I got sick because I became a Muslim. Oh Muhammad, leave me from this allegiance I gave you. The Prophet ﷺ let him go. He went back to his home tribe, and he wasn't Muslim anymore. No one sought him out and tried to give him a hadd or anything like that, because he was a non-combatant. He was not going to a warring enemy to give them secrets. So the apostasy question isn't someone leaving the religion and gets a punishment. It's someone committing high treason in wartime gets a punishment. And this is an international law today, and it's a law that saves lives. So anyone who says this is an unjust law doesn't understand what justice really is. That when you save 100 lives, it's better than that one person who chose to take the 100 lives. This is a concept that's understood once we retranslate it for our people. Once we understand it, shed our doubt, look at the totality of the sunnah of our Prophet ﷺ, look at all the instances that negate how it's being translated, and then confirm our faith in it, and are happy with it, and believe that it actually would uplift our nation, if applied. And that's just one thing. And that's one thing that's controversial. Now imagine all the things that have no controversy in them but have been lost for our people. Like the concept of non-prejudice that our Prophet ﷺ taught us. Our Prophet ﷺ taught us that when someone is a citizen, who they are lineage-wise, and what the crimes of their parents and their lineage and their tribe has nothing to do with them. لا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى. Even if their crimes of their ancestors are the worst crimes against one's ancestors. They should not be held accountable for. And our nation needs this today. Our nation needs this healing today. And what brings them back together is a shared mission that they come together upon. It's shown when the Prophet ﷺ had a pact with tribes in Medina for a pluralistic nation, with Jewish tribes living with the Muslims side by side, and polytheists in the same nation, co-citizens. One Jewish tribe betrayed the pact and caused what would have been a risk of lives to other members of the nation. The Prophet ﷺ dealt with that Jewish tribe only. And he dealt with the combatants from that Jewish tribe alone. Those who from the Jewish tribe came to him and said we were against the opinion of our leaders, he let them stay in Medina. The rest were deported. The Prophet ﷺ didn't mention not deporting the other Jewish tribes. On the contrary, Bani Qurayza, who were remained in Medina, became the holders of the pact at the most sensitive time of an invasion coming to Medina. And the Prophet ﷺ trusted them with the pact until they betrayed him. And that was after what Bani Qaynuqa did. So there's no generalization in our faith, even of contemporary people of the same race, or of the same religion, or of the same tribe. We deal with each individual and each small group by the decisions they make, by the tradition they've upheld. And our nation needs that healing for race relations today. All we need to do, and this is just one example from the Prophet's life, there's so many examples of non-generalization, of dealing with people not based on the tribe they're from. To the extent, Ikrimah, the son of Abi Jahl, when he became a believer, after warring against the Prophet ﷺ for more than 2 decades, and his father being called the Pharaoh of this ummah, the Prophet ﷺ being sensitive for his now co-citizen and brother in faith, after all these years of battle, says to the people that are around him, Sayatikum Ikrimah Musliman. Ikrimah, I was told he's going to come as a believer, as a member of our brotherhood. فَلَا تَسُبُّ أَبَاهُ. Don't you dare mention anything about his father. Because he knew that everyone had pain in their hearts about Abi Jahl. And we still talk about Abi Jahl. But Ikrimah is not Abi Jahl. May Allah be pleased with him and group us with Ikrimah in the high paradise. So, this is the tradition of our beloved people, and this is just 2 examples. An example of taking how we deal with high treason, an example of taking how we deal with people of different tribes and races. Our nation needs healing. Our nation needs answers to the troubles that trouble it. And it starts with us answering the troubles in our homes and in our individual lives with the Quran. Understanding it, rediscovering it, refamiliarizing ourselves with its actual answers. Not the ones we hear from other places, not the ones that have been propagated, and not the ones that have been interpreted in the Middle Ages after the Prophet ﷺ that are not attributed to him or his companions. They're attributed to a contextual understanding of a scholar of a certain era. You can't just take it and apply it in America in 2015. We need scholarship for America in 2015 that understands our beloved ﷺ and his companions' application of the Quran and his tradition. And that's when we can revive. What's our role in that? Our role is to shed our doubt of anything that exists that we hear of our beloved ﷺ. To have no doubt that his sunnah is what's best for all people. And to have no doubt that all we have to do is take that step and revive it in our lives. As we learn, we revive in our lives. And we will see a world of difference. And we can't do it alone. So we need our community together to do it. I ask Allah the High and Exalted to return us to the footsteps of our beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, so that we may revive our own lives, our people's lives, and our nation with the sunnah of our beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Allahumma hdina fi man hadayt, wa afina fi man afayt, wa tawallana fi man tawallayt. Allahumma ighfir warham wa tajawaz amma ta'ala innaka antal azim akram. Allah, we ask you to guide us and forgive us and accept us with those whom you've forgiven and accepted. Allah, we ask you your love, and the love of all whom you love, and the love of everything that leads to your love. O Allah, we have come here seeking forgiveness from you, seeking your acceptance, seeking your love. And you are the one who said, ask me and I will give you. Here we are asking you to give us of your compassion and your mercy and your love and the best in this life and the best in the hereafter, and to save us from the hellfire. You are truly the best guardian and the best guide, and you are able over everything, including our hearts, O Allah. We return to you and repent to you from all that we've done of bad decisions or actions. O Allah, this is what we ask, and you accept all that we ask, and we ask you to send peace and blessings upon Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and all those who follow him until their resurrection. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Praises to you and Lord of the world,